Okie dokie, perfect. Okay. First of all, thank you all so much for joining us this evening for our webinar on how to survive the menopause. But we'll be talking about how to thrive as well, so not just surviving. Katie, just flick through to the next slide for me. Okie dokie. So the first thing we've written here is we've written a menopausal transition, because obviously this is a transitional phase. It can last for a little while for some people or a shorter time for others. So we're talking about it being a transitional phase. And in particular, we're going to be going through how nutrition, hypnotherapy and exercise can help you survive. So we're going to be touching on those and touching on a little bit of HRT as well. So next slide for me. So let's meet the team first of all. So we have obviously myself, I'm Bethan, and I'm the clinical hypnotherapist and mind coach here over at And for Health. We also have Katie, who is obviously you've already heard from and we'll be hearing more from. She's our registered nutritionist and she's also got a health expert. Not with us this evening, we also have Connor Levi, and he's our physical therapist and personal trainer over here. And then we also work with 2 GPs in our 418 clinic, and that's Dr. Barty and Dr. Barty as well. So they have contributed some information for this evening, which is what we'll be going through in terms of the HRT. Next slide for me. So let's have a little think about terminology. In terms of, again, mentioning the menopausal transition, because it's not just a single phase and it's made up of many, many different phases. In particular, obviously, perimenopause and postmenopause, different phases and different things going on at different times. Now, I've popped down here menopause, thinking about it in terms of what it means. And thinking about it means pause on how your body used to be and how your mind used to be, and obviously that pause and then moving forward and thinking about a break. And the reason why I've thought about that from this point of view is because we don't want to be at war with our body. We want to take that time. We want to find out what's going on. We want to arm ourselves with as many tools as possible so that when we go forward, we can really, really kind of diminish some of those symptoms and learn how to manage those symptoms a little bit more. So as I say, we want to move away from it being a time when it's just confusion. We want to move away from it being a time when you feel like you kind of are at war with your body, and you want to kind of come into a phase of stop, reset. Okay, let's take these tools forward. Let's see how I can manage these symptoms for myself. Now, in terms of symptoms, we've got a list here, and it's not designed to be an exhaustive list. It's just a list that are some of the most common symptoms. If at the end anybody does want to offer any that aren't on there, please do feel free. But we've broken them down into physical and emotional and mind symptoms. So as you can see from the physical, a few things that we've got there, obviously the regular periods, hot flushes, sleep disturbance, night sweats, skin dryness and palpitations, muscle aches and joint pain, etc. And then with the emotional symptoms, we've got mood swings, anxiety, brain fog, confusion, memory problems, and low self-esteem. Now, again, when those aren't designed to be an exhaustive list. So again, if anybody does want to offer anything at the end in terms of anything that wasn't on there, please do let us know. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you mostly about hypnotherapy and also mind coaching, which is what I offer here. And I want to obviously talk as well a bit in a broader sense about what hypnotherapy is and what hypnotherapy isn't. So some of you may have had some experience with hypnotherapy already, but if you haven't, it can also be kind of something that can feel a little bit daunting. And what hypnotherapy isn't unfortunately what you see on the television. It isn't kind of your Darren Browns, it isn't your Paul McKenna's. They obviously do hypnosis, which is a slightly different thing. Hypnotherapy can be broken down into hypnosis and therapy kind of coming in as one. Now, what hypnotherapy is a nice kind of way I like to think about it or describe it is a point of focus. So if you imagine when you go to the cinema and you're sat in that chair, now your focus is quite wide. You are thinking, perhaps you can hear someone eating popcorn. You're also thinking about the film that's about to start, the noise. You're also thinking about if you turned your phone off. Lots of things are going on, lots of pulls on your attention. Now, what hypnotherapy is in that kind of term is it pulls all of that focus from that wide kind of view into a much more singular and focused view. So bringing you from all of those things going on in that cinema to that moment when you're watching that movie and you become embroiled in it. And that's kind of what hypnotherapy is. It pulls your attention from this wide space into a much more channeled space, and allows you to do work at a much deeper level, from that big focus into that small focus. Now, can everyone be hypnotized? A bit of a rule of thumb really is that we have about 10% of the population who are really susceptible, 10% of the population who are a lot less susceptible, and then most of us just kind of sit somewhere in the middle. How it will feel will be slightly different for everybody. For most people, it's a very just relaxed state. I've had some of my clients say they feel quite, their arms are quite heavy, or even their arms feel quite light. Perhaps a little bit of swallowing happens as well as the body just relaxes down. But it is a very pleasurable, very nice experience for feeling a sense of relaxation. That's kind of the hypnosis side of it that brings you into that state of relaxation. Now, once you're in that state of relaxation, then this is where the therapy side of it can come in, and we can work on things at a much deeper level to help with mind coaching. In terms of kind of common misconceptions with hypnotherapy, you are the one that's in control. No one has control over you. So it's up to you to decide how deeply relaxed you would like to be. And that's something that, again, obviously you, with time, to decide as well. Next slide, please. So when we're bringing hypnotherapy into hypnotherapy and also the coaching side of it into menopausal transition, how can it help? So there's quite a few different ways that it can help. First, we're going to talk about is behavior change. So when you are going through menopausal transition, there can be a lot going on for you, whether that's mind, whether that's body, and that can lead into some behaviors that aren't necessarily going to help. And that can be things like eating a higher sugar, higher white carbohydrate, higher fat diet, and those things slip in through tiredness, through mood changes. Hypnotherapy can help in terms of bringing you back into that behaviors, into doing better behaviors, and more importantly, wanting to do better behaviors for your body that lead on to you feeling much better. Knock-on effect of that in terms of the weight loss side of it as well. Better behaviors leading to weight loss, leading to motivation to exercise as well. And these all tie in together, and in particular with self-worth. Now, a lot of kind of ladies, and I'm just going to do this as a bit of a broad generalization here, can have had not necessarily the best relationship with their body over time. And one of the things I like to work on with my clients is that body relationship, is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, not being at war with your body, coming to love your body, coming to have a high self-worth for yourself. And all of these things link in together, because the higher you kind of have, the more self-esteem you have, the more likely you are to be choosing those good behaviors, exercising, mindfulness, eating correctly, the more likely you are then to be able to lose weight easier, and the more motivation you're going to have to exercise. It becomes a real knock-on effect. It becomes like a feedback loop that can be created. Now, hypnotherapy helps with this because it puts that powers of suggestion into your mind when you're in that relaxed state. The more relaxed your mind becomes, the more susceptible you are to able to take those changes on board. But these are all things that before a hypnotherapy session you discuss, things that you want to change, not what the hypnotherapist wants to change, but what you want to change and what your goals are.
Right, well, that's on me at the moment, not on me.
Oh, can I just ask everyone to make sure they're just on mute for me? Sorry. Just double check you're on mute. Okay. And then going on to changes to sleep pattern. Well, this can kind of be a twofold effect really with the hypnotherapy, because hypnotherapy can use guided imagery, guided audios to help you get to a much more relaxed state before you go to bed and allow you to drift off a little bit more easily. But also in a hypnotherapy kind of setting, in a hypnotherapy session, we can put those powers of suggestion into the mind in that relaxed state, and then those get carried forward into that evening as well to help with those sleep changes. But also another thing hypnotherapy can do, you can find out if any of these symptoms are, if any of these, things that you're suffering have not just come up through the menopausal transition. That's something that has kind of followed you through from other areas in your life or other times in your life. And hypnotherapy can kind of help with finding out where those come from, and then can help with helping deal with those. Stress and anxiety obviously can be a big one that can come up through the menopause and menopausal transition. And different techniques can be used, including kind of self-hypnosis, which I will talk about in a moment, and visualization, and again, learning these techniques, learning these tools in a hypnotherapy setting. Because when you're when you are in that state of mind hypnosis, your mind again is much more susceptible. It's much easier to learn things. You're not being kind of pulled in all different directions as we are in day to day. Your focus isn't spread out. That focus is very internal. It's very focused on this task. You're able to learn. You're able to pick up all of these tricks, these tools in that setting, and then take them into day-to-day life. And again, as that follows on, management of mood. So obviously stress and anxiety can have a massive impact on management of mood. So learning those tools in those therapy settings and taking those away, you can then help with that management of mood on a day-to-day basis. And we will touch on that again going forward. And I've kind of already spoken a bit about this, but it's that making peace with our bodies. It's learning what might happen to your body, learning why it might happen to your body, but also learning the tools that can help you manage those. The more information you arm yourself with, the better it will be. The more options you give yourself in to kind of help with those symptoms, aka things like hypnotherapy, things like exercise, things like food, and things like mindfulness, the more likely you are to be able to manage these symptoms a little more effectively. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is self-hypnosis? Well, when people ask about hypnosis, one of the interesting things is people saying that they can't be hypnotized at all. So that brain state, the brain wave that you bring yourself to, that you are going down to when you are hypnotized, is the kind of state where when you wake up first thing in the morning, you're not quite awake, but you're not asleep. That's the same brain wave that you go into when you're hypnotized, same as when you're just falling asleep at night. So it's just before you're asleep, but you're not still quite, you're not wide awake anymore. It's that sort of brainwave that you take yourself down into. So effectively, we are hypnotizing ourselves twice a day anyway. Self-hypnosis is kind of like taking a time out. Self-hypnosis, a nice easy trick that you can do is you can look at a wall in front of you, let your eyes lift slightly up, so they're almost straining a little bit, allow those eyes to become a little bit strained until you eventually want to close them. That takes you into kind of part one, really. And then from that point, you can then just count yourself back, trying to count back from like 50 or 25, bringing yourself down to the number 1. You're going to have found that in comparison to when you're wide awake and your eyes are open, you're in a much more relaxed, much more alpha state of brainwave. When we're awake, we're in a beta state, and when we're coming down into that state, we're in an alpha state. Now, what you can do in that state is you can talk to yourself, you can visualize, you can create change for yourself. So if you you have like a very busy day, if you've got a meeting, something that you're worried about, for instance, and you haven't had the greatest night's sleep because your symptoms have been keeping you up, then you can practice that level of self-hypnosis. You can practice that looking up, straining the eyes, letting the eyes close and counting yourself down, and then visualizing that meeting or that busy day going exactly as you want it to go, and finding that actually your day will become a lot easier and a lot better. And that's because taking yourself down into that alpha state allows you to create that change, stop you being with your mind everywhere, and brings you into that focus. It's something that you can practice, become better and better at, and take yourself into those states more easily. And it doesn't have to take very long, 5 minutes. And they can be little breaks in your day that you do for yourself, just pull yourself back into a much more positive, into a much more productive frame of mind, and allow that kind of positivity and that productivity to drip through to the rest of your day. Next slide, please. So how can it help practically in everyday life? So we've just created someone here called Judy, who is suffering with some symptoms with her menopausal transition. So, for instance, she hasn't slept particularly well. So in the morning, a recommendation would be to already have created some morning mantras, whether that is something that you have decided for yourself, such as today is going to be a productive day, today is going to be a positive day, today is going to be a day where I'm going to get X amount of things done, or I'm going to just feel more positive today. Whatever the mantra is for you, placing those on post-it notes, the first things that you see. So when you wake up in the morning, if you've got a bedside table, placing those mantras where you first thing you see, so you're not allowing your mind to go into that, oh my God, I've got so much to do today, and I'm feeling like this and I haven't slept. You are, no, today is positivity. Following that up with a little morning meditation or mindset session. So something that either you've got an audio recording like a hypnotherapy recording, or you're just going to take 5 minutes to breathe, but just keep giving yourself that space and not taking a long time, 5 minutes, pre-breakfast, putting that visualization out there, putting that mantra out there of that, what you want to dedicate your day to. And then the rest of the day, obviously you've got breakfast, you've got lunch. And then at lunchtime, taking yourself outside, taking yourself out into nature if at all possible. Again, doesn't have to be for a long walk, just 10 minutes of fresh air. But at the same time, listening to an audio such as I've popped here, a stop and reset audio, which is a hypnotherapy type of tool, and listen to it whilst you're walking. So that walking doesn't just take on exercise, you're not just taking on fresh air, but you're giving your mind that training, giving their mind that training and that reset, stopping yourself and thinking all of those other things that you've got to do, or thinking about all those ways that you're feeling, and just being like, no, bringing myself back into that moment and reframing. Then obviously the rest of the day you have the dinner, and then taking yourself into that end of day focus again, mindset, a short sleep audio. So if you didn't get a great night's sleep the night before, give yourself a little treat, lying down, getting into bed and putting on a hypnotherapy audio, 15 minutes of that audio, allowing yourself to become calm, allowing all those positive reinforcements that those audios can give you to come into your mind, and then drifting off to sleep. Next one, please. Okay, so before I speak about HRT, I would just like to say that I'm not a doctor, and the information that we have got here is taken from our GPs. So we do have more HRT information available as a resource, but as I'm not a GP, I'm not going to be able to talk about it in too much depth. As it says here, HRT is a safe and effective treatment for most people going through the menopause and perimenopause, but your GP will discuss any risk with you if you do decide that that is a route that you want to go down. What HRT is, it involves using the estrogen to replace your body's own levels around the time of menopause, because obviously they will be lower, and that reduction in that estrogen has been causing some of those symptoms that we've already spoken about. There are different types of HRT and different doses of HRT as well. And again, obviously you want to find the right dose and the type, and that usually means that those symptoms that we've spoken about alongside the other tools will help them to improve. Next slide, please. Benefits and risks of HRT here. So the main benefit of the HRT is it can help relieve some of those symptoms that we've already spoken about. And obviously the risks of the HRT here are small, but they usually are outweighed by the benefits. Now, these are, especially the benefits and the risks, are something that we would 100% recommend speaking with a GP about. But as I've already mentioned, we do have a little bit more information on our resources for this HRT, and obviously we do work very closely with one of our clinics has 2 private GPs in it as well. And next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Beth. I'm just going to start my video again. Okay, so I am going to talk to you a little bit about the nutrition side of things. Can you hear me okay, Beth? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so before I go into the nutrition side of things, I do just want to make one thing a little bit clear, which is that a good diet cannot fix the menopause. So we are not saying that with all of these changes, you will suddenly be menopause free, but it can certainly improve health and decrease the risk of menopause associated health concerns. And those menopause associated health concerns are something that I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail. What are those things? What are those health concerns that we need to be aware of when somebody is going through the menopause, and what can we do to try and prevent them from happening, or if they have started to happen, to try to reverse them? So there are a few different things that we are aware of when somebody is going through the menopause. There are a couple of main things that we need to be really, really aware of. So those are things like heart health and bone health, also things like weight gain and fat redistribution, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in more detail. And also looking at raised cholesterol levels, because that's something that you are at an increased risk for when you're going through the menopause and when you're post-menopause. But there are some other areas that we can look at helping through nutrition as well. So things like poor sleep, and also things like hot flushes, brain fog, and night sweats. They are all things that, looking at nutrition, we can in some people reduce to an extent. So lots of different areas. The 4 main areas that I'm going to go through today are heart health, bone health, weight gain and fat redistribution, raised cholesterol levels, and then thinking a little bit about hot flushes as well, if that's something that you suffer with. So the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about is weight gain and fat redistribution. So when somebody goes through the menopause, what we see is a decrease in metabolic rate. And what our metabolic rate is the amount of energy that we expend each day. And when we have a menstrual cycle, that requires energy. So every single month, we have to make lots of hormones, and we have to build up a uterine lining, and all of those different things take a lot of energy. And so when that stops happening, that energy is no longer needed to make those hormones, to build that womb lining, all of those different things we don't have to do anymore. And therefore, our metabolic rate decreases. So that's one of the reasons why we see weight gain through the menopause. And we also tend to see this change from a pear shape to an apple shape. Now, this is quite a big generalization, and there obviously are premenopausal women, childbearing age women who have more of an apple shape. There are people who have more of a straight shape. There are people who have more of a pear shape. But this is a sort of generalization in what we generally tend to see is a change from distributing adipose tissue, so fat or adipose tissue, it means the same thing, on the hips and the thighs and the bum. That's where we tend to store weight when we're of childbearing age. And then when somebody goes through the menopause, we tend to see more fat distribution on the tummy. And the reason why we see that is due to lowering levels of estrogen, which basically pushes the body to start to store fat more around the tummy. And what we can see made worse by this is symptoms such as hot flushes. So when somebody has got more fat around their tummy, or just a higher level of adipose tissue in general, then obviously that is very insulating for us. So when we do get these momentary lapses in body temperature, which is essentially a hot flush, we do see that people of a higher body weight tend to cool down more slowly, and therefore the severity of the hot flushes can sometimes be more severe. So what can we do about this? How can we try to prevent/improve this? Well, firstly, increasing physical activity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about physical activity and bone health as well in a moment. But increasing physical activity means that we can increase that metabolic rate. So when we see this decrease in metabolic rate due to the reasons that we've just been through, actually we can counteract that by increasing our metabolic rate through physical exercise. And the next thing we can do is have a higher adherence to a Mediterranean style diet. So there's lots and lots and lots of research on the Mediterranean style diet for peri and postmenopausal women. And there's loads and loads of evidence to suggest that it's a fantastic diet for people to follow when they're going through postmenopause. And we say diet, but really it's a way of eating, because it's not really a diet as such as people know it, or as people think of diets. It's not a restrictive way of eating. It's just an opting for these foods over these foods way of eating. And I'm going to talk a bit more about the Mediterranean style diet as well when we think about heart health. And then finally, if somebody needs to lose weight, then looking at a sustainable weight loss protocol. So when we're looking at sustainable weight loss programs, we are not talking about any sort of weight loss program that is telling you can lose a lot of weight in a small amount of time. We're not thinking about any weight loss programs that are trying to give you a quick fix or anything like that, because they're not sustainable. And actually diets like that can end up leading to an increase in weight over time. So the more these people go round in cycles on these diets, the more body weight increases, which isn't something I'm going to go into now, but that's not something that we want. So we want a sustainable way to change our lives in a positive way that is sustainable for the long term. So moving on to heart health. So as we discussed before, lots of women have this pear type body shape during the childbearing years. And this pear type body shape is what we call cardioprotective. Now, we don't actually know the mechanism behind why this happens. There's lots of research in the area, but an actual definitive mechanism as to why this is the case is not 100% clear. There are quite a few theories behind it. But essentially, when women are of childbearing age, their risk of heart disease is much, much lower than it is for men. So men have a much higher risk when we're in those childbearing years of heart disease. And one of the reasons for that is because women tend to have this pear shape fat distribution on their body, and men tend to have more of an apple shape fat distribution on their body. So women tend to be more pear shape, men tend to be more apple shape. And that is thought to be, having a pear shape is thought to be very cardioprotective. So it protects us from heart disease. It doesn't just not increase our risk, it actually protects us from it. But when we go through the menopause, there's a decrease in estrogen, which increases this fat deposition on the tummy. And that is associated with having a higher LDL cholesterol level. Now, LDL cholesterol is what often gets called the bad cholesterol. And then you've got HDL cholesterol, which is what's called the good cholesterol. So we have more of this LDL cholesterol when we have a higher amount of fat around the tummy area. And as we know, bad cholesterol is associated with an increased risk of heart disease. And unfortunately, when we get to age 65, the heart disease risk for women actually then becomes the same as it is for men. And it's due to these changes that happen during the menopause, that all of these amazing cardioprotective things that happen to us when we're of childbearing years, we are no longer needed to bear children and to stay healthy, essentially. So all of these things happen, which then causes our risk to increase. So what can we do about this? So first and foremost, it's a really, really good idea to get your cholesterol levels checked. If you are going through the menopause, or if you have just gone through the menopause, then asking your GP for them to check your cholesterol levels is something that's really, really sensible to do. It is within the NICE guidelines that sort of GPs follow. So it is something that they should do if you ask for it. And it's a good way to check that whether your cholesterol levels are too high, or if they're not, then that's really great. But then we can do things to try and keep them at a good level. So getting your cholesterol levels checked is something that we really, really, really would recommend everyone do. And as I say, you should be able to do that through your GP. Then again, the Mediterranean style diet comes back. So adherence to a Mediterranean style diet has been shown to be cardioprotective during and post menopause. The Mediterranean diet is very high in polyunsaturated fats and very low in saturated fats. It's also high in fruit and vegetables. It's high in fiber. It's high in plant-based foods. So all of those things are really, really good for our heart and protect us from cardiovascular disease. So adherence to a Mediterranean style diet, lots of studies find that women who follow a Mediterranean style diet compared to women who don't have a much lower incidence of heart disease. And then finally, increasing more plant-based foods into our diet. So switching from foods like red meats and full-fat dairy to more plant-based foods that really, really decreases risk of heart disease and helps us to keep a healthy heart. And also eating lots of fiber is really, really good for heart health as well. So next, I'm just going to talk about bone health. So lowering levels of estrogen, which obviously happens when we go through the menopause, escalates calcium loss from the bones. And what I just want to say about this is that to an extent that is actually normal. So you can think of your bones as a calcium storage place, and in everybody it's completely normal that calcium gets put into our bones and calcium gets taken out of our bones. And we call that whole process calcium turnover. So when we eat calcium and we absorb it, if we don't need it there and then the body goes and stores that calcium in our bones. And then during times where it needs some calcium, it will take it out of the bones. That's completely normal. That's, as we say, called calcium turnover. However, with the menopause, with this lowering level of estrogen, what happens is the rate that calcium comes out of the bones is escalated. And what can happen is the rate of calcium loss can exceed the rate that calcium goes into the bones. So therefore, we get an overall net loss of calcium from the bones. And the problem with this is that it leads to weakening of the bones. And due to that, around 50% of women over 50 will suffer a fracture due to poor bone health. So it's really, really important to prevent deteriorating our bone health from the onset of menopause. But what I will say is, if you are listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, I'm well into menopause, or I'm coming out the other side of menopause and I haven't thought about my bone health, you can still increase the strength of your bones. So you can reverse it to an extent. Obviously, if we can prevent it from the start of menopause, that's fantastic. But if you have had some deterioration in bone health, then it is something that you can do about, and you can increase the strength of your bones. So in terms of how we can improve our bone health, first of all, eating 2 portions of calcium-rich foods per day is really, really important for women going through the menopause and post-menopause. So if you are somebody who eats animal products, so who eats things like dairy, then this can look like around 2 portions of dairy a day. If you are somebody who doesn't eat much dairy or opts for more plant-based foods, then it might actually look more like 3 to 4 portions a day. So the National Osteoporosis Society recommends that peri and postmenopausal women have around 700 milligrams of calcium per day. So in terms of things like milk and cheese and yogurt, that's around 2 portions. But if you're eating foods that are high in calcium, that are more plant-based, then it might look like 3 to 4 portions. Now, what is fantastic is that lots of plant-based milks and yogurts, so things like soy milks and soy yogurt, are often fortified nowadays, which is fantastic. But it is worth checking because they're not always fortified. So it's definitely worth checking. Weight-bearing activity is brilliant for our bone health. So when we're thinking about weight-bearing activity, we're thinking about anything where we are carrying our own body weight. So essentially, that's any exercise that's not swimming or cycling, or where we're sitting down on something. So weight-bearing activity, anything where you're carrying your own body weight. So even something like going for a walk would count as weight-bearing activity. But if you can then push that further and do things like do some exercise holding some weights, or do some Pilates with some light weights and that kind of thing, then that increases your bone health even more. It strengthens your bones even more than just doing it with your body weight alone. So weight-bearing activity, and then if you can add extra weight into that as well, then that's fantastic. And then finally, vitamin D supplementation. So everybody in the UK now should be supplementing with vitamin D. So from October to March, we all should be taking a vitamin D supplement of 10 micrograms. Even if it's a beautiful sunny winter's day, it does not matter. You cannot make enough vitamin D in the sunshine that we get during the winter. You need UVB radiation to fall on your skin, and then a reaction happens in your skin to make vitamin D. Unfortunately, during the winter months, we don't get enough of that UVB radiation come through, so we don't have enough to make vitamin D in our skin. Therefore, we need to be taking a supplement. It's really, really important, and it's especially important if you are somebody who's going through menopause, or if you're post-menopause. The reason for this is because we talked about that calcium turnover in the bones. Well, vitamin D is one of the things that helps us to put calcium into our bones. So in order to deposit the calcium into our bones, we need vitamin D to be there. So it's really important that vitamin D levels are sufficient in order for all of that lovely calcium that we are eating to then end up in our bones. And then the final thing that I'm going to talk about is hot flushes. So what is a hot flush? Why does it happen? Lots of people who go through the menopause have them, but don't actually sort of realize why they occur. So you have a structure in your brain called the hypothalamus, and this controls body temperature. And estrogen, along with many, many other things, is one of the things that helps to control body temperature, helps your hypothalamus to control body temperature. And when somebody goes through the menopause and we get these fluctuating levels of estrogen, the hypothalamus basically gets a little bit confused and has these momentary lapses where you have a dysregulation of body temperature. So it has moments where it just loses control and struggles to regulate core body temperature for a few minutes. Now, weight gain, which can obviously happen through the menopause, as we've said, can increase the time that it takes somebody to cool down, because we're more insulated, so it takes longer to cool down. So because of that, the severity of these hot flushes can be worse if somebody has a higher percentage of body fat than somebody who doesn't. So obviously, weight loss is one way that we can help with the hot flushes. But there are a few other things that we can do as well. So as we say, weight loss is one way that we can help to allow ourselves to cool down more quickly, because we are getting rid of some of the insulation on our body. The other things that we can do is reducing foods like caffeine, alcohol, and spicy foods. So these foods have all been shown to increase both the frequency and severity of hot flushes. So reducing our intake of those foods can be really beneficial to reduce the level of hot flushes. And finally, there's some evidence that actually taking an omega-3 supplement can reduce the frequency of hot flushes that somebody gets. So this is kind of limited evidence, but it's worth taking an omega-3 supplement for bone health anyway. So it's definitely something that's worth considering. And it's definitely not something that works for everybody, but some people do find that taking an omega-3 supplement, such as a cod liver oil or something like that, can decrease their rate of hot flushes. So in terms of my Judy slide, so how can Judy change her day to be a little bit more in line with the things that we've just talked about? So firstly, if Judy was having toast and a cup of coffee for breakfast, which is something that lots of people do, or have, cereal and a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or something like that, it's what we tend to eat for breakfast in this country. However, the problem with a breakfast like that is it is pretty much just solely carbohydrates and not a lot else. And that's not going to keep us very full for very long. And it's not containing some of those essential nutrients that we've talked about. So instead, for breakfast, Judy could have something like fruit, which contains lots of fiber, which is going to keep us nice and full, with some Greek yogurt, which contains both dairy, so that's one of our portions of calcium-rich food a day, and also contains protein, and protein keeps us nice and full until the next meal. And then she could have some granola on there as well, just to make it a little bit more fun and exciting. And then if Judy has a ham sandwich and crisps for lunch, she could change that to something like a chicken, feta, and avocado salad. So this is nice and high in protein. So again, it's going to keep her nice and full. We've got feta cheese, so we've got another calcium-rich food, and it is also low carb. So if somebody is looking to lose weight, then they could have a low-carb meal a day, which would reduce their energy intake slightly and help along with that. And then for dinner, Judy might have a chicken stir fry. And whilst this isn't a bad meal at all, and that sounds like a very nice, healthy meal, what she could do is every now and then try swapping out some of that chicken for an oily fish like salmon. So packing the meal with lots of veg, so that's going to have lots of fiber in it. And then also getting in that portion of oily fish, which contains those omega-3s that we've talked about that are really, really important for bone health as well, and can reduce hot flushes. So making sure we get plenty of omega-3, which is an essential fatty acid, which means that we can't make it ourselves, so we have to get it in our diet. That would be a really good idea. And then for her snacks, Judy might have had some biscuits at work or in between doing some jobs or some errands or something like that. And a good snack to have instead could be something like veggie sticks with hummus or a couple of light baby bells. A couple of light baby bells is another portion of calcium and also high in protein, which again is just going to help Judy to feel more full and satisfied until her next meal. So there are a few sort of quick and easy little swaps that she could make, which would make her diet far more of a Mediterranean style diet than it was before. So what I want to talk to you about now is basically what we call a multifactorial approach to treatment. And what we mean by a multifactorial approach is going in at things from several different angles. So if we go into something from one angle, so if we just look at menopause through nutrition, or we just look at menopause through exercise, or we just look at menopause through mind management, then there is a decent chance that you will get some improvement. However, in order to achieve the absolute best improvement possible and the best health outcomes that you can possibly achieve, taking this multifactorial approach is really, really beneficial and just gets you to the best place that you can possibly be in terms of symptoms, in terms of health. So looking at things like nutrition, so as we've said, weight management and heart health, improving bone health, trying to improve cholesterol levels, and then also possibly looking at things like hot flushes and brain fog, we can do that from a nutrition point of view. But also, it's a really good idea to combine that with things like exercise. So again, which can help with weight management, it can help with stress relief and mood, it can help improve your bone strength. And also it can help improve sleep as well. And then also looking at the mind management side of things as well. So reducing stress and anxiety and boosting self-esteem, motivation to exercise, eating patterns, changing behaviors, all of those different things. When we combine them all together, it gives you the best possible treatment outcomes. So for anybody who is interested, we're very quickly going to go through sort of what a package looks like, and then we're going to do the Q&A session afterwards at the end. So in terms of, we're very excited about this because it is literally launching today. You are quite literally the first people to hear about it. But in terms of what our package looks like, I'm going to go through the nutrition side of things, and then I'll just quickly hand over to Beth to go through the mindset side of things. But from a nutrition side of things, we have an initial appointment with registered nutritionist, who is myself. I'm going through basically all of the protocols of everything we can do for helping through the menopause from a nutrition perspective, and also with weight loss if that's something that you wanted to achieve as well. That goes really nicely with the menopause nutrition ebook. And then we also have 2 appointments further along through the program, which involve food diary analyses, where we look at everything you're eating and we do really, really detailed in-depth analysis. Are you ticking all of those boxes? Are you getting everything you need to be getting? Is there anywhere we can be improving? And how can we be improving your diet even further? As well as things like snack swap resources and meal planning resources and recipes and that kind of thing. Beth, I don't know if you want to really quickly talk about the mindset side of things.
Yeah, so in terms of the mindset side of things, you can see on here, it would be 3 menopause mind management coaching sessions with myself. That would depend on what your goals were and what your kind of personal things that you would like to achieve out of this. They would obviously be very focused around personal goals and also about how we can move forward. And as I've spoken about before, speaking about getting into making friends with your body, making kind of higher self-esteem, that kind of thing, and also management of symptoms. Alongside that, there would be a pre-recorded mobility relaxation class that obviously can help with things like sleep and can help with things like achy joints. And then on top of that, you would then also get self-hypnosis audios. So that's something that can help with sleep. That's something that is for a morning mantra, and that's something for a stop and reset throughout the day. On top of that, the resources that you would get as well would be a goal setter resource, a weekly planner resource, daily checklists, symptoms trackers, and skin health video, and also HRT information pack. The skin health video and the HRT information pack both come from experts. So our skin health comes from a skin health expert in menopausal skin, and the HRT information comes from doctors. So that is the package that we are launching today, as Katie has said. So if we go over on to the next slide, then our information is on here. So if anybody doesn't want to ask questions today and wants to ask them another time or has anything they want to go through, then here's mine and Katie's email addresses, and also the website of the company, our company, which is Andra Health. So again, feel free, if you don't want to ask questions today, feel free to email us whenever you want to. But if you do feel like you'd like to ask a question today, which we would love, then either feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you'd rather type that question, then please feel free to do that as well.
I am just really quickly going to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm just going to really quickly finish the Facebook Live because it's giving me an echo and I won't be able to hear people very well. So just bear with. Okay. Fab. So yeah, as Beth said, if anybody has any questions, please do feel free to ask. If you'd rather not say them, then you can put them on the chat box, or you are more than welcome to drop us an email if you'd rather not sort of say on here. I'm going to stop the recording now so that if anyone does want to ask any questions, you won't be on the recording that will go on our website or anything